The premise of Stray is a little goofy. I may even go as far as to say it's silly, but I really like it. You're a regular ass cat that has to traverse through this post-apocalyptic cyberpunk world to return to your family. This bizarre concept made Stray one of the most anticipated games of the year. But has it lived up to the hype? Depends on who you ask. For me, the game didn't exceed, but just met my expectations because I knew what to expect. The trailers showed a dark and beautiful game, but the gameplay itself was limited to the cat walking straight and jumping onto ledges. This was exactly how shallow the gameplay was throughout my whole 4.5 hour playthrough. But I'll get back to this later because I don't want to cloud the fact that I honestly enjoyed the game. Haptic feedback was a key selling point for the PS5, and Stray is one of the few games that actually uses it significantly. I could feel the wooden texture of trees, the weight of paint canisters, and even the impact of paws touching the ground while running. Subtle uses of the controller speaker and haptics added a certain oomph to each movement, but for the most part, the movement is pretty lackluster. Some people are calling Stray a platformer, and to those people I say, respectfully, shut the fuck up. And if you want to be a dweeb about it, yes, by the technical definition, Stray can be considered a platformer. But there's a stark difference between this type of platforming and real platforming. I'd say the same about Uncharted 4. This isn't platforming, it's just brainless gameplay. This is real platforming because you actually have to think and there's a risk of dying. Comparing real platformers to Stray is like comparing Breath of the Wild to Mr. Krabs overdoses on ketamine or something. It just doesn't make sense. As I mentioned at the start though, I really liked the premise of Stray. So I enjoyed going through and finding the different memories that provided brief but interesting lore on this civilization. This was very well implemented since the lore did not go into a stupid amount of detail to the point where it just got overwhelming, like in Cyberpunk 2077. The visual attention to detail was also surprising to me considering how densely packed some levels were. You could zoom into anything and the game could seamlessly switch focus between the foreground and background to show off its environment. The amazing soundtrack also helped smoothly transition between the serene and eerie parts of the game. Okay, now back to complaining. The game contains many puzzles, most of which are very basic with solutions that can sometimes be missed easily. There is some almost escape room type stuff every once in a while, but most of the gameplay is just filler. This wooden plank, for example, is pushed over to open a new path. It isn't very interesting the first time, but it's still used repeatedly for the exact same purpose. Since there is clearly some focus placed on the gameplay, I wish they had more creative ways of traversing through the world because it was somehow even more brainless than I had expected. In my opinion, Stray could have been better if it just committed to being almost completely brainless, like one of my favorite games, Abzu. Abzu is a very unique type of game. You literally cannot die in it. And even though it definitely isn't for everyone, I think it's a perfect example of how shallow gameplay can still create a fun and memorable experience. Stray was enjoyable due to an engaging story paired with beautiful environments. But gameplay wise, I'd go as far as to say it was below mediocre, which obviously hindered my overall experience. Stray's gameplay becomes stale quickly, but Abzu's doesn't, even though you can only do one thing, which is swim. Abzu has nothing to offer in terms of game mechanics, but its live orchestra soundtrack and one-of-a-kind art style create a genuinely breathtaking journey. I enjoyed exploring Stray's world and interacting with characters, but it's only been a day since I played this game, and it already feels forgettable. The vibe you feel in Stray is something that games with 10 times its budget struggle to achieve, but the overall experience of the game was just alright. Most developers don't have the balls to dedicate a central button to something like meowing, but I wish more risks were taken movement-wise. I know most of this video was just me hating, but I still like Stray. I just think it was too safe to be something truly special.